Hey Legionnaires, Omega Edge here and welcome back for another video. In the last episode we focused on layer 2 for our Crimson Fist, but in this episode I want to tackle something a bit more complicated, non-metallic metal. So we're back to painting Crimson Fists. Previously we were focused on getting used to blending with oils, getting our lights and values placed in the correct space and making sure our red wasn't pink. This video series has been geared towards showcasing you just how you can paint with oils but in a way that still will get you the results you need. As the channel grows though, we'll be painting a variety of different models, but Space Marines are very easy to learn on due to their large round shapes. In this episode, we'll be diving into non-metallic metal. Now, I made a video about painting non-metallic swords in order to prepare you for this challenge and give you the fundamentals you need to tackle this tricky process. So I definitely recommend checking out that video in the link above. There are several types of non-metallic metal, but the main three can be separated into bronze, gold and silver. On this Crimson Fist, we'll be focusing on silver, and this is a good place to start in my opinion. I would definitely suggest grabbing some references or some real world objects and just observing how light moves across it. Now, I've covered this in the aforementioned episode where we painted the power sword, but the keys to good non-metallic metal are both value contrast and light placement. Remember, so long as our lights and values are placed in the correct area, we can make an object appear metallic even if it's not blended. But by blending, we are able to make the metallic material look more convincing. With that said, let's get on to painting the model, starting with our palette. Okay, so I've got two colours on screen right now, Preylene Black and Payne's Grey. So both of these colours are really low value. The black is actually tinted with green while the grey is tinted with blue. I don't even know why they've got that name, but hey. And then I've actually got scroll white. So I've decided to go with Preylene Black because it's the armor's already quite blue as it is for the Crimson Fist. So having that green tinted metal color that we're going to make stick out will just make it pop even more. And it's slightly warmer than the blue as well. So that just gives us more control. This color is actually something I use for all of my black painted recipes, and it's definitely something I recommend. When you mix it with the yellow in the scroll white, you get this really nice, almost like minty green color. And then if you add a bit more white onto that, it just basically makes a really strong highlight. So I definitely recommend picking this color up if you're trying to paint black. It's a lot more interesting than just painting black by itself, and it actually keeps the saturation. Okay, so the first step is to apply our prime glaze, and I'm just applying that into the areas where I'm going to be painting the metal onto. So this chest piece, I've completely forgotten what it's called, I haven't looked at 40k in so long, but this winged area, and then the knee pads, I think is that a crux terminatus? I'm not sure what this knee pad is actually called, but that knee section, I'm applying it on there too, and that's all in preparation. So it's actually good to leave maybe a minute or two for that to settle in before we apply onto it. And you can see there I've gone in with my mid-tone onto the sides of the armor, and I'm just layering up bit by bit, and then I'm going to blend that out. You can see how the pre-shade when we first apply the paint onto the model is actually affecting that section, and I'm just having to dry brush over it to clean it up and just make sure that the pieces are shining. So at first, when you first start applying, the colors and then blending away, the colors will become very desaturated, and as the paint starts to mix with the already wet paint on there, it will start to lower the value. So we just have to be very patient, not apply too much color. Right now I'm just layering it on, basically blocking out, and this is pretty much the exact same thing we've been doing with both the red and the blue of the armor. So a note about non-metallic metal with oil paints. Now if you did go and watch the power sword video, you'll remember that we basically every single time we dry brush over the color, we are desaturating it just because of the removal of some pigment. So when we layer on, we need to make sure that that color is thicker than the one we placed on before. It doesn't mean that we have to really worry about making our layers super thick. We can still keep them quite thin, but we just need to make sure that it's always thicker on than the one we've placed on previously. This is actually called the thick over lean rule, or thick over thin, and it's basically a rule that all oil painters need to follow to be able to layer on top of their previous layer. And doing it this way, and I'm just applying in a shade into those recesses just to bring back some shadows and contrast. But doing it this way just makes sure that the paint actually stays really thin and doesn't look really like gammy, I suppose, really like thick and bunchy. But this way still looks really thin and really nice. So yeah, I really prefer painting this way. And now you can see me just layering on the highlight color of our metallic, and you can start to see I'm defining those volumes. You can see where the highlight is, and then the rebound, and then also the kind of shadow area as well. So I would definitely recommend when painting any model like this, especially as it's got this really like ball shape on the chest, that you just keep track of where you've placed your highlights previously, where you place the light on the top of the chest area, and then the light coming down kind of reflects off of that. So now I'm just applying the highlight onto the edges of the area, and I've also started working up on the skull. Now again, contrast is super important for here. If we have a really gradual blend on our metallics, it won't really read as metallic. It's the contrast, it's the jump between really dark to really bright that helps things to read as metallic, as well as light following the consistent direction. It's really important that we just continue to redefine those edges and add that contrast to help those areas pop forward. And when we come on to the later stage of painting this miniature for the details, we'll actually go back into here and just using a pin wash to redefine those areas. So now I'm just getting distracted, moving on to the chest, the face, and just blocking that in as well for the next layer, whilst I leave that other area just to kind of dry. A lot about oil painting is just moving from one area to another whilst you're waiting for an area to allow you to work over it again. It's so quick painting this way, and I know it may not look that way, but it actually is really fast painting this way, because it means that all the time we would have used on blending with acrylics, we're actually doing in a matter of seconds with oils, and it just allows us to jump onto different parts of the model really easily. So now I'm just like going in, highlighting with a stronger value over that area, and I'm going to go over to the edge and just reapply those shadows and redefine those shadows. So whilst the chest is drying, and we can really see from that shot, we can see like the shine and the contrast there as my highlights gradually get smaller, I've started to work on the knee area. Now, still learning how to paint on camera and keep my footage, but if we actually look at the image, we can see the reflections from my lamp shining down onto the model, and I'm actually just following that from this position. I'm following that image and I'm just copying it, and I'm just painting where that light is shining. Almost because it's quite glossy, it's really picking up the reflection, which is exactly what we need. So as I'm blending, I'm keeping my highlights really small. I think I'm using a 0.0 or 0 by 0 brush, and I'm just keeping my highlights really small, and then every single time I apply, I just blend it, but I try to keep that blend to a really tiny area. I think it's actually worth getting a brush with a stronger point just to keep your blends really refined. Again, leaving a lot of areas in shadow, or essentially almost unpainted with the first layer, with that first prime glaze, and then I'm going in with a dot highlight into another area just to bring it up. And so here I'm just working on the reflective side, the rebound, and I'm keeping it lower value just so I can keep like the focus and to create the illusion that light is rebounding from the other surfaces. Now, if you've done it correctly, it will look something similar to this. You can see how it's almost there. We're not there just yet, but we're almost there. So now it's just about, after blocking that out, it's actually just about redefining those volumes and redefining the values as well, just making sure that we're having that contrast where it needs to be. So when I started to look at it and held it up in the camera, I noticed that it was like the colors were kind of getting lost, and I just needed to refine it a bit. So now we're on to that second stage, still our first layer, but refining those values and volumes that we had before. I then went in with an even brighter value now, our stronger highlight from our original mixture, and I'm just making sure that I just go into those edges. You've got a little bit of fluff which I have to remove, and then I go in with my dry brush and just smooth out those areas. But you can already see the contrast, and that dot that I've created, that's made brighter by the really deep shadow adjacent to it. So again, it's all about contrast, keeping those highlights really bright, but then making the other areas quite low value. And I'm just reinforcing that again there on the sides of the wings, on the skull I did a minute ago. Just reinforcing all of that work. Now I'm just trying to get those dots, brightening up those areas on the top and of the knee and the lower section of the crux on the knee. Just redefining, just creating that just really pops of light, on the base areas, and just pushing as much as I can really, as long as the paint will allow me to push without completely forcing a blend. So oil painting is really just a rinse and repeat. The fundamentals that you've been taught in my previous videos are just constantly repeating here. It's all just about understanding the theory behind what you're doing. It's not as simple as like I just apply the paint and it just works. No, you've got to really understand the kind of ideas, and that goes for acrylics as well. Anyone wanting to get better needs to take the time to kind of just understanding the theory side. Once you get the theory, it then just becomes about execution and understanding, translating what's on your head onto your brush. But the more you do it, like I could not paint non-metallic metal before learning how to like pick up with oils, and I was getting there. I was doing some really basic spheres and shapes, but until I actually committed some time into learning these fundamentals, it was really difficult, really hard to do that. So I've put in a bit of a highlight, but I'm going to blend that just to bring the value up, but still not as bright as the opposite side, because that's not the direction the light's coming from. And I'm doing that across the entirety of that side of the model, just to create that rebound light. And then I'll just deepen it down, blend it out, and then deepen it down with a shadow. And you can see just from that angle where the rebound light now hits, just showing it to be reflective. You might notice that as you do this, the model actually gets some of the other paint onto it, so just be careful, and you can just go and refine that. I'm just creating that shadow with a little pin wash. At this point, obviously the paint on the area underneath is dry, so I can just go under that and just redefine those edges, and just make sure that we've got the definition we need for this section of the model. Now I'm going in with a really thin dot of pure scroll white, so it's not white, it's just a scroll white with a bit of a tiny bit of the Preylene green in it, Preylene black in it, and I'm just placing those highlights in those areas where I need them, and blending them down a little bit, but trying to keep the strength of the transitions that I had before, where it kind of jumps. Painting this way is like really fun and really rewarding. It just ensures that as we're going along, we're really keeping an eye on the rest of our volumes and reflections. Take your time with this section, guys. There's absolutely no reason or need to rush through it. Just take your time, keep looking at the model, referring back to your reference, and just observing. So as you can see now, because it started to dry already, I'm able to layer over those sections and just redefine the highlights each time and just make them progressively brighter depending on where I think the light would reflect from the rest of the world that this marine is standing in. And you can already see how the metallic kind of looks like greeny. So we've got that mix of blue, green and red, and it just makes the whole model just pop a lot more, especially that chest area. So now, while that area is drying, going back to the knee again, just redefining the highlights. Any area that I over blended or just blended the color out too much, I'm going in and just redefining it as I go. So a note on this, if you notice that the color stops painting, the layer stops painting, and you don't want to ruin the blend, you've just got to leave it to dry. Don't keep on working the paint. I've said before, like, knowing when to stop is a really good skill to have for oil painting. Yeah, if you find that the paint is no longer adhering to the surface, dry brush it a little bit and then leave it to dry and just move on to the area until the paint lets you to go back to it. Okay, so now we're going to work on the crux, and this is going to be a similar technique. So just like the knee pad, we're just repeating it, and it should actually be easier because it's just one flat round larger surface to work on. And you can see as I've already applied the glaze onto the we've got those reflections from the light from my lamp reflecting onto the model. So we're just basically going to use that to our advantage and copy that for our work on our model. So yeah, just redefining those edges, making sure paint is exactly where I need it to be on over all those raised areas as well, especially at the back. And now we apply on highlight. So the reason we're starting very bright is, one, because this area is on a raised spot. It's right next to that really bright highlight on the shoulder, so I want this area to be very bright. And then also this will make it easier to blend, and we need less of a transition from here, so we actually get that blend going from light to dark really quickly. And we're just blending those shadows out where that area in the center still remains really bright. And we're just going to continue that consistently across the rest of the surfaces in this area. And this is really like what makes the material look bright, especially whilst it's glossy, what makes it look metallic. Because we know that it's not a metallic surface, we're not using metallic paint, but just by using that contrast and taking advantage of the highlight and the way the light is shining, we're actually able to follow that realistically and get a realistic looking non-metallic metal. Something to bear in mind is that non-metallic metal, for the most part, it sometimes only works from one angle. However, some of the most skilled people are able to make it work from several angles or every angle, and that's a real skill that you need to develop through just learning on how volumes work at different angles. But by twisting the model in this way and then just looking at how it would work from different angles, turning the model, looking at the value, you're able to basically develop that understanding. And that's all I'm doing here, is I'm just turning the model in my hand and I'm just looking at it from different angles to just make sure that that's actually where I want the highlight to live. And we're getting really bright there. This is just a little bit of Preylene Black and 4:1 mixture of Preylene Black and Scroll White, just making sure that it's super bright. And just redefining those lights. So just change the angle, take your dry brush, slowly blend it to where you need it to be, and then just follow the light, follow the guides. And also just be patient, yeah, just be patient. But you can see just two colors have already created such variation, just because the mixture is blending. As we dry brush, it's blending those colors around and creating that kind of variation between them. So you really don't need a lot of colors. And now highlights are getting smaller each time, just redefining those areas, trying to keep the light consistent. Okay, so whilst that area is drying, I'm actually going over the model again. And this is all layer 1, by the way, so we're just letting areas dry, working our way around it, and then moving on to different areas to just kind of work that space up. And you can see that now I'm trying to force it to be brighter. Now, I would actually say you could probably have just left it as it was. It was fine for that first layer, but I think if we're trying to push it even further, it's actually a good idea just to, you know, place some spot highlights where you want them on the real edges of the area, and then you can always work it up again. And now it's starting to look metallic. It wasn't really there before, but I think now we're really starting to get an understanding and push it a lot further. And just on the rim of that belt buckle, I suppose, giant belt buckle, belt strap. And here it is at the moment. So that's the end of layer 1, and we're going to move on to layer 2. So yeah, hopefully that made more sense, and I'll see you in the next section. Okay, so on to layer 2. And this layer is going to be rather quick, as it's actually just about increasing the saturation of the colours we've already used by layering up on them and using high-end pigmented paint. We want to make sure our values pop, so we'll be deepening our shadows and increasing the strength of our highlights. Now, if you don't have cadmium yellow, don't worry, you can still use scroll white and just increase the amount of titanium white to the mixture. The point is to keep it bright. Okay, again, so for layer 2, we're mainly just focusing on deepening the shadows and increasing the power and strength of the highlights. So just keep watching as I work on this knee pad, and I'm just adding some more of my shadow mixture into that side to really enhance and make the light areas pop forwards. And then I'm doing the same on the other edge, especially the part of the model that isn't in direct sunlight. So it's all going to be about getting those shadows darker, and then I'm going to go on top with a brighter color like I'm doing here, and just accentuate the strength of the highlight in those areas. Now, I'm not going over the whole part of the ridge of that side of the model. I'm just going over the sections that I think would be brightest, and just adding in that higher value at such a distinct contrast to the area next to it, and that's the effect it creates, like just that really empowering bright area where your eyes are drawn to. And when we blend it, we can just soften that transition, just leaving the edges really bright. So this is quite tricky if you don't have a small brush. I recommend using a 00 for this, and you can flatten it out and just blend it that way, or you can keep the point and just so slowly blend that, and slowly and softly blend that area away. So just keep being patient with this section and go slowly. We don't want to ruin the hard work we've done already, but it's good to actually take our time with this. And this effect that we're adding with layer 2 adds such a strong effect to the rest of the model and to the metal that it's definitely something that if you decide to do and you practice on, you'll see a big difference. Now I'm just working my way around the model. I'm just removing some excess paint I had, just making sure it's not thick. Right now I'm using a 00 actually for applying the bright paint, and I'm just going over the edges, and even from this distance you can see how that dot of light just adds to the effect, making it look like it's shining, and it's actually very powerful. So we're going to get a bit closer now, and I'm going to be able to show you a bit more details of how I'm actually using my brush. So again, here's me just deepening the shadows down. I'm just applying a prime glaze over that area, or sorry, not a prime glaze, a thicker mixture over that area that's still quite thinned down. And then I'm going to go over with my brighter highlight and just empower it that way. So you can see which way the light is actually coming from, which direction it's coming from. And I'm just softening those transitions, and I'm going to want to make sure that it doesn't stay kind of grey. Otherwise what happens is we end up getting stone. Instead we want like areas of extreme brightness again to facilitate the idea and to show that it's actually metallic. So again, just sticking to the edges, and I'm going to highlight the rim of these areas just to make them pop a bit, and then I should go back in and make those areas that I've missed that are still kind of grey darker. For now I'm just sticking to the edges on the highlight and just making sure it's going really slow. This is such a small point as well, such a tiny part, but this is a really good point to speak about the fact that oil paints are not difficult to make hard lines with. So long as you're not blending the paint afterwards, that's pretty much the secret. You just don't need to blend. You can keep the paint thin and creamy, and then you just make sure that, here you go, there's me going in. So I'm going to go in the shadow now, just create a little dot, and you're just making sure that you don't need to blend everything. And this is how we get that really strong effect, as you can see here. So I'm just going to keep taking my time with this, and it's pretty much more of the same, just working from different edges. Depending on the side the model's facing, you can increase the value or decrease the value. So here I'm keeping it quite low, again to show that the light is coming from one direction. So I'll probably just keep it to these edges at the top, and then work my way around. And this side I will blend because I don't want it to be as powerful as the other side. So yeah, just working my way around the edge of the model to create those rebound lights. Yeah, I'm just going to blend it out, keep it quite soft. So it's actually very therapeutic painting this way. The system of painting, and just to make it clear so you guys remember, it's always apply the paint first, apply with the prime glaze, or if you're on layer 2 with a slightly thicker layer of paint but still quite thinned out, so a thicker prime glaze, and then you apply your highlight, and then you blend that together, and then you can go over again with your higher color and your deeper shadow and just apply over again. So it's just about working up stage by stage. You can see I've got a brush in the background. I'm always switching between my brushes. I think this is actually kind of fast. It's like a habit I built basically to make sure that I've got my blending brush and it stays dry, and then I've also got my highlighting brush and it stays with the color I need to mix. Or color I need to use rather. Don't ever mix with your nice brushes. Always use a crappy brush to mix. And just increasing the highlight on those edges and creating that contrast. So for a competition piece model, I might even do, this is only layer 2, but I would probably do like 4 or 5 layers where I just build this up really slowly and keep the paint really thin. But for layer 2, this is like good for like a character model. If you've got a character model for your army, I would probably paint in this way. There are actually other ways to paint with oils that don't require you to get a sponge and remove the paint. Very similar to what I'm doing here, and maybe I'll cover that in another video if I look into army painting. So now we're just going on to the shoulder, crux terminatus, and you can see I'm just applying a bit of the thicker prime glaze over the model. I'm not doing it everywhere, I'm just keeping it to those kind of recessed areas, and then I'm going to go over with a brighter layer of paint to accentuate it. So now you can see I'm starting with just the shadow area, just empowering that and to make the light, which is coming from that direction, more powerful. So here comes in my highlight. and I'm just applying that into that small area. I'm actually always impressed like how the iPhone can actually pick this up. I really think I still need to buy a DSLR camera, but yeah, I'm not doing too badly with a mobile phone for picking these lights up. So hopefully you can see that detail as the model moves and I turn it. You can see it building up slowly and keeping that vibrancy. Trying to keep the camera in focus as I can. But for the most part, yeah, like hopefully you guys can see what I'm doing. It's just a repeat of what we've been doing before, and we're just empowering that, adding those lights. For this reason, I don't tend to edge highlight my models. You definitely can, and I probably will in this series when we get onto the details section, which is the next episode. And I tend to not do that because I'm lazy, but you should, and you definitely can if you want to. And that just adds a bit more detail, makes it a lot more crisp and a lot more fine. And you don't need to do that with acrylics, that can be done with oils too. So I'll show you in the next episode, edge highlighting. But it's pretty much the same as what we're doing here. Just leaving those gaps in between the white and the grey, and then slowly blending them together when necessary. Some areas I might actually leave by themselves. I probably won't go over the entire model and blend it. I'll just go over to where I feel like the highlights need to be smoothed out. And we can always varnish this as well, just so we don't touch that paint. But this way, by not blending the entire thing, we're actually keeping it very vibrant and bright. Okay, and that's the finished non-metallic metal. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that, and it's helpful. Now you can actually decide to go over the rest of the model and paint the non-metallic metals into areas that I've missed. But for the next episode, we'll go into the details and we'll be covering the highlights. So let's go. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it was a lot to cover. I tried to increase the amount of painting as opposed to the amount of theory in this video. Again, if you didn't watch the previous video where I go over non-metallic metal by painting a power sword, please check that out. And don't worry, we'll have more opportunities to paint non-metallic metal in the future. But for now, just give that a go. And if you liked what you saw, please send me a message. Feel free to follow me on Instagram. And yeah, just get in contact. I'm actually planning to start a Patreon page soon too, so that'll be another opportunity just to connect with me and follow my progress. But I'll update you guys when that's actually up and launched. Okay, stay blessed, and I will see you in the next episode. See you later.